Hey there, welcome back to Moving Stories, the show that helps you learn about other people's moving stories. You know, I don't know where you are in terms of your migration, if you've just decided you want to migrate, or whether you're halfway across, or whether you've just arrived. But the whole purpose of Moving Stories is to familiarize you with the fact that there are thousands of people that are moving all the time, and many of them have a really good experience. So today I am sharing with you the interview that I did last year with Louise Ross. Now, Louise Ross is a writer. In fact, we've got a couple of her books here at home. She's a podcaster. She does a lot of work with women. But here's the thing that really drew me to her. You know, she's an Australian who moved to London and then went to France and then went back home to Australia, then to Colorado, before finally coming to Portugal in 2014. She is trained in psychology and counselling. And one of her biggest things that she does as you'll find from listening in today, is she helps to support women with change and understanding the processes that we go through. So anyway, I'm going to bring her on in a minute. But what you're going to be really learning about, I think, is how to integrate and how to really enjoy the process of moving around a lot. You know, one of the things that I think Louise really demonstrates really beautifully in this interview is the thought processes that she went through, and also how she coped during the not so good times. Because, you know, when you do move and live somewhere, you still have the ups and downs of life. So anyway, join me now as we welcome Louise Ross. Hey, Louise, thanks for joining me. I'm delighted to have you here. This is the first time we've actually met, so this is great. So I've heard some of your story from the wonderful work that you've done, and I know that you've been interviewed by Carl, my husband, and I listened to it. It was one of the rare ones I actually listened to, and I couldn't actually stop listening to it. It was really great. I love the fact that you've lived in a couple of countries. So you've emigrated twice, is it, or is there more than that?
Let me see. I left. Hi, Louisa, to start with. And I love that I get to call someone by a name that's so familiar. Yeah, Louise and Louisa.
Yeah, I know.
It's kind of cute.
Great name.
Well, I'm from Australia, but I left Australia in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. And it was a working holiday, I guess. And I worked in London, and then I worked in France for a period of time. Mm-hmm. So that was well, first of all, I actually travelled through the US. So that was my first sort of solo foray abroad. And I was 22, I think. And then I went back to Australia, and then I went back to school, but I was terribly bored. So I took a semester off, and a girlfriend and I went skiing in the US because I used to just love to ski. And then we deferred another semester and we stayed. So I was there probably about 10 months in Utah. And while I was there, I investigated graduate programs that were available in the US, the kind of study or the kind of programming that just wasn't available in Australia back then. This was mid-80s. And I applied to this one particular school that was in Colorado, and I was accepted. So I packed up and I left Australia when I was 26. Wow. And when I went through the international gates and I turned around and waved to my family, I knew that this was it. I wasn't coming back. And how I knew that, I don't know. I just knew that there was another life for me somewhere else, that a life really wasn't opening up for me in Australia, not in the way that I intuitively hoped for, perhaps. And that life did open up for me in the US, in Colorado. I did a wonderful program there. I finished up my BA, and then I did an MA in psychology and counselling, but in Jungian psychology, so studying the works of Carl Jung. So it was a graduate program in symbol systems, basically, because that was his area of expertise and dream analysis. Yeah. So I was in the US for 27 years.
Wow.
Too long. And I was looking for a way to get out. Mm-hmm. And or looking for a way to leave, I should say. Get out sounds dreadful. Looking for a way to leave. And I wanted to come back to Europe. So I was able to do a lot of travel while in the US, travel abroad, travel in Europe, and then back to Australia every couple of years. But I was in Mexico at a week-long workshop, and I met a Portuguese woman, and we became great pals. And she came to stay with me. I came to stay with her. And really, it was one of those situations, I think, where the universe kind of opened a door for me. And I was really ready to step through that door because it was entree back into Europe, the westernmost point of Europe, obviously, here to Portugal. Yeah. And so for a couple of years, I just visited a lot. In a way, it was sort of investigative visits. I'd come for 6 weeks at a time, and I came, maybe 3-4 times a year at different times of the year to just try it out. Yeah, that fly is loving you.
Fly season, isn't it, in Portugal? We're coming to the end.
It is. They're really sticky too.
Yeah.
And it was the winter of 2013, and I was out here on the Estoril coastline, and people were sitting on the Paradão here having coffee, and the winter sun was glorious. And it really reminded me of Australia, because in different parts of Australia we have a really mild winter. And having been landlocked in the US up against the Rocky Mountains for all those years, it was just like an elixir for my soul to be by the ocean again, in this kind of familiar cafe culture by the ocean, where people were just hanging out in families, in groups, in the middle of winter, just enjoying the weekend sunshine. And I thought, yep, this is it. So I was with my Portuguese friend. I said, could you drive me around this area? I don't know this area at all. And we did. We sort of drove, or she did. She drove me up through the neighbourhood, and I saw, I think it's Margarita's School of Language that's just actually near the casino in Estoril. And I was like, wow, if I lived here, I could walk to the train station, I could walk to school and, start doing basic Portuguese 101 and kind of find my way. And that's what I did. I moved here went back to the US after Christmas, so it was early 2014, and I started to make noises about selling my apartment and packing up and moving, and I did. A few months later, I arrived here, I think beginning of May 2014.
Wow. And how long did it take for you to feel like you were settled here, like you'd properly arrived? What was the first impressions like when you came through the door? I was prepared, Louisa, because I don't think I'll ever forget landing in the US on my own, knew absolutely no one, middle of America. It was and Boulder, Colorado back then was a bit of a cow town. It was a university town, but it wasn't developed. It did develop while I was living there. And so I remembered that feeling of just like culture shock, loneliness, not really understanding how things work. Didn't have a car. I didn't have a car in the US, didn't have a car here. I remember having such mixed feelings, really mixed feelings. But what was different all these years later, landing in Portugal, is that I knew in order to find my way and find my feet, I was going to have to find other people like me. So my Portuguese friend and her extended family were wonderfully warm and welcoming. And I basically had a family through them. But the cultural differences were there, and I knew I needed to meet other internationals and, probably other international women with similar interests, perhaps even around my age, in order to have those kinds of coffee conversations that girls need in order to feel like you're kind of settled or that you're comfortable in your skin. Yeah, that sense of belonging.
Yeah. So very quickly, I think I probably Googled back then, very quickly I found International Women in Portugal. which, I mean, this is 2014, so there wasn't much else. I think there might have been internations, but there weren't even, I don't even recall Facebook groups like there is now.
Yeah.
So I very quickly became a member and got very involved very quickly with International Women in Portugal on their board and all this sort of thing, so that I could just network and connect with other like-minded women. And I did very quickly. But from the point at which I arrived to the point at which I felt like I had really landed and I was settling it's probably, it was probably 2 years.
Mm.
Yeah.
What had changed in that time that you felt suddenly like you really belonged?
Because I was on the board of this organisation. So I could really use my skill set.
Yeah.
So I think I remember talking to Carl about this, that, you suspend an identity when you leave one country for a new country. I mean, nobody knows you. They don't know your skill set. They don't know who you are, where you're from, what you've achieved, your education, nothing. And so I came here with all this skill and kind of semi-retired in as much as that I was no longer working for anybody else. And I actually hadn't been. I'd been self-employed for many years. But I'm also a project person, so I'm not one to sort of sit and twiddle thumbs or join up with a golf club, even though I, do enjoy golf sometimes. I don't do that. I mean, I am a real project person. And kind of like you and Carl, actually, because you keep manifesting and manifesting. It's really interesting to watch your journey. Anyway, so I could bring all these skills forward into this organisation. And so I seemed perfectly suited to be on that board and participate, because the last time I had been employed in the US was formally employed with a company, was with a preparatory school for international students from developing countries. Mm-hmm. So it was like this little mini UN in a university town. And all my colleagues had either lived abroad, were in bicultural marriages, had taught abroad. So there was this this feeling of these are my people. We all understand each other. So it was the same thing when I got involved with IWP. These women had lived all around the world, had moved countries, sometimes independently, sometimes with partner, sometimes with partner and family. And so there was a resonance. We all sort of spoke the same language, even though, of course, so many of the women are multilingual, but we all spoke English. But when I say the same language, I mean we understood each other's journeys.
That's very, very powerful, to be on a journey and also to have people understand your journey and for you to understand theirs. That's hugely powerful. There's so much I want to ask you, actually, Louise. In fact, if you don't mind, I just want to go back in time a little bit, because I really want to drill down into the sort of intentions, how you knew you were ready for a move. Because like you mentioned that early on you'd gone to work in London and live in France. I lived in France for 5 years myself, actually, back in my early years. And then you went back to Australia and then decided it was time to go to America. How did you know about the times to move? Like, what was it that was going on inside you that made you think, I mean, I don't even know what you were thinking. Like, for me, when I've moved, I've all of a sudden thought my life was maybe too small, or just being eager for adventure. But I wondered, was it a similar process that's happened each time between your moves? Just want to delve a bit into that, if I may.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, Louisa. I mean, I think that is how I felt, that somehow life had gotten too small and too familiar and I wasn't being challenged anymore. And a desire for new. And for me, I think always my vision for my life is growth, personal growth. And if I'm not growing where I am, if I'm not continuing to evolve, then somehow I feel an inner nudge, if you like, to put myself in a new situation that's going to cause personal growth. And of course, that's not for everyone, because to put yourself in a situation that causes personal growth is always uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So, as I just said earlier, I knew as a result of moving to the US on my own, knowing no one, that it was dreadfully uncomfortable and difficult. And for a young person at 26, I really was lonely for a period of time. But I expected that arriving here too. But I had more mature skills and a knowledge of how to navigate that and deal with that. So it's kind of an inner nudge, I guess, like feeling that I'm not being fed anymore. Yeah. That, yes, perhaps my world has become too small. Or I think that's a really nice way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah, that you volunteered earlier.
Okie dokes. I love that. I love the idea that you weren't being nourished, or that you were, I love the linking in with growth. I think that's important. You're right, because for a lot of people, they don't get that calling to move. They're very contented in their lives. And one of the questions I've been sort of passing back and forth between Carl for some time, it's almost like an ongoing conversation, is could we have grown in the lives that we had? And of course, we know the answer is yes, but we chose not to. And is it that we didn't know how to at the time? We'll never know. But I do seem to see lots of people who move who are definitely on a growth path, because there's nothing you can do but grow out of your shell when you drop your identity.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So I'm guessing with your work with IWP, the international, if I got it right, International Women of Portugal, you must have seen a lot of people, a lot of new arrivals, a lot of people coming to start their journey. Without breaking any confidences, have you seen many flourish in their moves, or have you noticed the things that seem to occur when people aren't flourishing? I mean, I'm guessing it's quite a sorry, this is a messy old question. I'm guessing you see people in a situation where you're all supporting each other. So I'm guessing it's all about flourish. But, there are people that tend to go home after a period of time. It's not for them. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on leaving and how it occurs. Have you noticed any patterns?
Oh, that is a complex question, because obviously so much has changed in the last few years as a result of the pandemic. And pre-pandemic, the kinds of things that I would see that would cause people to move on were more related to their work, relocation with work. There were a lot of independent women in IWP, women who had moved here independently, that were quite settled and quite comfortable, had really found a life for themselves here. And many of those women are still here. Some had started to travel sort of around the time the pandemic was breaking, and then got stuck, and as a result returned to their country of origin, and then didn't come back to Portugal. So, if the pandemic had not happened, I'm sure it'd be a different story. The other thing that I noticed too, I've basically been here 10 years now. What I do notice is it's actually a transitory kind of community along the linear between Lisbon and Cascais. Yeah. Whether it's a little different up north along the coast where you and Carl are, and the Silver Coast and so on, I'm not sure. I can only speak to what I observe here. And it reminds me almost a little bit of working in ski resorts, which I did in my early 20s, where, people come in, they live and work together closely for several months, and then they move on to the next seasonal work. Yeah. So that's very short term, obviously, transitory relationships that you make. But what I notice here is that people do come and they do go. And then again, with the pandemic, what I noticed is some marriages fell apart. Yeah. And unfortunately, it was the women that I knew that were in difficult situations then, and they returned to their countries of origin as a result. I've also witnessed during the times that I've been here, during the years that I've been here, friends that are married, husbands retiring. And as a result of that, they may then start, or have in fact started to spend less time here and more time in one of the home countries of the couple, because they're often bicultural marriages.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, dare I say, I've actually lost quite a few friends here. They've passed cancers, accidents. So the longer you're here, I'm in my early 60s now, so it's not unusual if, in fact, you have friends that are older. And through IWP I did, and these women, a number of women have passed, which has been very sad. So it's a range of situations I've seen. I have seen more recently, sort of since the pandemic, I guess, an influx of newcomers who, and I'm sure this is a topic that's coming up with you and Carl as you interview people, who have moved here starry-eyed about what Portugal will offer them, and then have been quite surprised that it's not exactly as they hoped or imagined, and have returned to their country of origin.
Yeah. I mean, that is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to people about the realities of moving and some of the difficulties we might go through, the loneliness, for instance, coping with a changing identity, etc. Because one thing that my husband's very good at, and I don't think he realizes just how good he is at it, is he's very good at being happy wherever he is. So I've seen
he is a happy chappy, Louisa. Yes,
happy, and he makes the best of every situation. Ever since I've known him, and so he finds himself happy, and people, of course, see him happy and think, "Oh, it must be the land of milk and honey," and then they come and they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure about this." It almost seems like a third world country to some people when they arrive, because it does appear to be 30, maybe 40 years culturally different in many ways. For instance, like when we go to festas, sometimes you'll see all these lovely little dancers accompanying the pop star, and they're in the tiniest of clothes, and it really reminds me of growing up in the 70s and 80s and seeing these lovely little sidekicks, these female sidekicks, to a magician. So there's a very, very different culture, and it really reminds me of growing up in the UK. And we find it really quaint, but it's not for everyone, is it?
Mm-hmm. That's right. You're right. When I first came here, my Portuguese family have a house down at Cabo Especial, it felt like the end of the earth. And I remember going down there and spending time with them and thinking, oh my God, I feel like I've stepped way back in time. It sort of feels like we're still in the dictatorship. I mean, it was, life was tough. It just felt tough down there. There were some homes and some sort of very rustic farms, very rustic is the word. And that was my first sort of introduction to Portugal. Actually, that was my very first visit with his family, was down at Cabo Especial. And I was imagining I was going to arrive, and in the morning I'd probably get up early, potter down to the village and have a coffee. And, I was thinking France.
Yeah.
I mean, that was not possible. Yeah. What was that?
I can understand why. I mean,
yeah.
I think there's a similarity in as much as, in central France and in central Portugal, there's lots of old farms and like houses that are collapsed to the ground. I'd never seen that in the UK so much. They get knocked down and then rebuilt, but so I was used to that. But like in France, I used to be able to just get on a moped and saunter down, have a nice little cafe, nice little gouloirs, maybe even a glass of wine as well. It's quite a different attitude, isn't it, here?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I couldn't even get to a local cafe. It was pretty isolated, the area. And you know, back then, fortunately, this is one of the good things about all the internationals here and the changes that they have, I think, brought with them, is the treatment of animals. There were so many abandoned dogs down in that area, and that would sort of move around in packs, and it was a little concerning. My Portuguese family said, you know, don't go out without a stick. And they were, oh, stick? Why? We fend off the wild dogs. Wild dogs? Yeah, the abandoned dogs. Oh my God, that's horrid. Absolutely horrid. So that's changed a little bit.
Yeah, it changed for the better for sure.
Yeah. So very, very rustic. What do they call them? They call them the provinces, or the rural areas.
So you've been here 10 years now. What is it about Portugal that is keeping you here? What does it give you that is so engaging that right now this is your life?
All right, so I'm going to have like a kind of a come to Jesus moment. When I came here, I thought that I'd come here for 10 years. So the 10 years is here. And in 2019, things were so busy here, just in terms of the number of tourists during the summer. I thought, I can't cope with this anymore. It's unbelievable. I don't drive, so I catch public transport. It would just be really difficult to get on a train to get into Lisbon from where I live in São João, it's in between Cascais and Carcavelos, if you like. People might know those two villages. And you know, I remember that summer 2019, it was so hot and the trains were so crowded. I'd often see people fainting on the trains. We were so packed in like sardines, and so many people, and the beaches were so busy, and ran. And I said, I can't do this. So I thought, well, everybody north is coming here. Why don't I think about doing something like during the summers, go north? And then the pandemic hit. So during the pandemic, I didn't think too much about it, but as we started to come out of it, I did start to think more about that. You know, how could I configure my life so that I could continue to enjoy what I enjoy here, plus spend time elsewhere during part of the year. So I'm actually thinking that next year, 2023, I will do that. And I'm now due for my permanent residency. And one of the reasons, this sounds terribly opportunistic, but one of the reasons that Portugal is now, or still feeling attractive, is that to have European residency, it's an open door to move about Europe, basically. And I'd like to keep that. And Portugal's the place that I'd like to have my permanent residency, my tax residency. I have my health insurance here. It's fantastic health insurance. I still have friends. I mean, a lot of friends have left over the years, but some of my core mates from the early days are still here. So there's no reason to sort of chuck the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Yeah,
it's just so, it sounds like you're very, very integrated where you are. So that's kind of bringing me to my next question is, what do you think the secrets are of integrating, you know, in your new place? I mean, you've obviously had to do it several times over.
Yeah. Community is so important. Like-minded people, developing several key friends. I mean, I'm an introvert, so I don't need crowds and I don't need lots of people all the time, but I do need a couple of good key friends. And I think that's important, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, to have, a last call of the day buddy, or, a couple of friends that you can get together with, whether it's a couple friend or an individual friend. But that's so important, to have those people that you can connect with and call on should you need to call on someone. So community is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you've been out and about sort of making connections, with going to college and with the IWP. And I'm sure countless other things have been going on over these last 10 years, right?
Yeah. Going to school, actually, language school is so important here, to get basic Portuguese down, and if not a little bit more than that, level 2 now is, I think, required for residency or permanent residency. And of course, then you do meet others at school. And yes, and organisations, whether it's some of the Facebook groups that have started up that have meetups and so on, or something like IWP, where you rock up to various events and activities and connect with other like-minded people, is very important.
So this looks like quite a good moment just to pause just for a second. And, when we bring Louise back on, she's going to be sharing with you one of the moments of crisis that she's had, actually, since moving over here. And obviously it's well worth listening to. And this is where I wanted to just pause for a sec, because obviously, wherever you are in your migration process, there are going to be times when things go right, and there are going to be times when things go wrong. And having coping strategies in place is really, really useful. So one of the things that Carl and I do, we have a couple of different support systems in place to help you, A, plan your migration, but also B, manage it, and know how to get support should you need it. So the first level of support we offer really is the Good Morning Portugal show, which Carl runs. And sometimes I help to do it with him, but it's mainly Carl's thing. This is his baby. And you can see that Good Morning Portugal on YouTube, and obviously go to goodmorningportugal.com, where he's got the news desk and all the articles and so much information about the growing Gumper community, or the Good Morning Portugal Gumper community in and around Portugal, and also stretching out into the world. So that's the first bit of support we've got. Then the next level of support we've got really is the Portugal Club, which again is something that is Carl's brainchild. But if you were to join the Portugal Club, you get access to a weekly online video conference with some other people that are migrating with you. And they'll all be at different stages of their migration process. And it's a weekly catch up, which Carl is facilitating. And people get the chance to talk about what they're going through, ask questions, share from their experience. And it's a really supportive little environment to go through this change, with other people. So I think that's really, really, really valuable, actually. And obviously you can buy different levels of the Portugal Club. If you want actual one-on-one consultations, then that's also available. Carl and I do those. And then the other level of support that we can offer you, and this is something that comes from my business. As you might know, I'm an astrologer and a coach, and I work from home freelance as a digital nomad. Isn't it wonderful that we can work online? Oh my goodness, it makes migration so much easier. Anyway, the migration plan is something that I do with, I can work with you directly, with you and your partner, or you and your family. But essentially, I look at all of your charts, everyone that's moving with you. I look at your charts, find out the times that are perfect for moving, the places that you might want to move to. And I help you plan them so that as you naturally go through the psychological processes of change and also grief, because you're leaving a lot behind, and that does take a little bit of time to get used to, I can actually help you plan your timeline according to what's going on in your birth chart. So if you wanted some help from Carl, you can go to www.goodmorningportugal.com. You could also go to www.theportugalclub.com. And if you wanted support from me, you go to www.feelgoodastrology.com/migration. Anyway, let's bring Louise back on and get a feel for how she dealt with her first major crisis moment in Portugal. How do you manage crisis points or like stumbling blocks when you're abroad in a new place? Because I'm sure over 10 years, and I'm also sure probably when you're in America, there may well have been a sort of crisis or, a really low point. And that's the point where lots of people do tend to go home or need to go home sometimes. Have you had any crisis points? And if so, how have you managed them? And what do you recommend?
Gosh, that's a good question. Again, in those early days, there were a few crises. I mean, I had a couple of accidents that were really nasty, and I think I mentioned them to Carl last time we talked. One was I rolled both ankles and I couldn't walk, basically. And fortunately, I'd already made friends in my apartment complex. So when I was lying on my back in the car park with both my ankles in the air and I was swelling immediately, I just pulled out my cell phone and I called my Portuguese neighbour, Fernando, and I said, please help. And I was actually on my way to see an osteopath. Oh, wow. So a couple of things there. Already I had found a couple of, holistic practitioners, because that's the sort of healthcare support I tend to seek. Already I had a couple in place. So my osteopath then was in Carcavelos and I was dashing to the train, which is why I fell or slipped and whatever. Fernando, my neighbour, who's Portuguese, was a great mate. He came and picked me up, put me in his car and took me to the osteopath. So I got immediate care and treatment as a result. He brought me home. I was already involved in IWP. So I think I probably either called someone and word spread. So I had people dropping by, a friend bought me crutches, another friend just came over to chat. So, I mean, I don't need to go on about that. I think the point is accidents oftentimes and health issues are oftentimes critical points that can cause you to, want to retreat and return to what's familiar. But I mean, I had left a culture where the healthcare is not good. I had catastrophe coverage, I think, in the US that didn't cover anything. But I did have my acupuncturist, I did have my chiropractor, I had all those people. So when I got here, I looked for those. And the challenge was that in the early days, I didn't have enough Portuguese to be able to communicate my needs. And these practitioners were mostly Portuguese. The chiropractor did speak or the osteopath did speak some English. But nevertheless, it was good enough, but it was challenging. Over the years, I found other holistic practitioners, carers, acupuncturists, and one thing and another. And that's been an imperative, I think, in order to help me get through some of these crises. I did have another major healthcare crisis that required dental surgery. But lo and behold, I guess I was in exactly the right place, because my osteopath, as a result of one of her clients, referred me to this dentist in Algés, just outside of Lisbon, that ends up being one of the top dentists that does this kind of work in Europe.
Wow.
So I got the best care I ever could have got. And so in order to really answer that question, those stories, I think, indicated that over time I had sought out the practitioners and carers and support people that I needed to get through the crisis that then eventuated. And it meant some Portuguese friends to help me at times when I can't, navigate the language or the cultural differences. My osteopath is international. She's actually Belgian, but she's lived in a couple of countries and she speaks Portuguese, English, and a couple of other languages. The acupuncturists that I've seen all do different kind of treatments than I'm used to, and it's all worked in varying degrees. The dentist that I found, because he's so well known internationally, I mean, you know, word is that Madonna went there when she was living here. I mean, he's that good. And Ronaldo, the football player, is one of his clients. So, and, you know, and it was the kind of care I never could have afforded in the US, because it probably would have been quadruple the price that it was here. I have private health care through, and I use CUF, and I have a great primary care doctor through CUF who's British. So, you know, that's a culture that I can easily navigate. So, again, I think these stories are just indicating that I sought out the kind of care and support that I knew I needed to ensure that should something come up, I'd be taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, until you've actually left once or twice, you don't know what you're going to need. Of course, once you've moved a couple of times, you have a pretty good idea of what you might need. And suffice to say, the first thing we ever do when we settle somewhere is find out where our nearest osteopath is, naturopath, where the best health food shop is, and we get ourselves. Yeah, we build our own health our own health plan.
Or your own health community.
Yes, because we have got a health community actually.
Yeah, because you're right about the health food shop too. You know, that's exactly what I was seeking as well. Where can I get good quality food? That's really important to me.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And so what's the happiest thing, what's the happiest part of your life right now, and what are some of the future possibilities that you're expecting or looking out for?
Gosh. Well, I have a spectacular view where I live. I'm kind of up a hill. I'm on the not the very bottom floor, the second floor, I guess, the second floor. So I look out on the Atlantic. I look toward Cascais. So it's absolutely spectacular. And I think sometimes I take that for granted, because just recently I had some friends over for dinner, and Suzanne walked in and said, "Oh boy, I hate that view." I'm like, sorry, I live with that every day. You know, and then when I lived in Colorado, and people would kind of wax lyrical about the beauty of the Rocky Mountains, and having grown up by the ocean, I realized I was always sort of stuffing my true response, which was, yeah, it's nice, but I'd really love it if there was an ocean there instead. You know, and now I have that. And it's glorious watching the sunset here. I mean, the colours in Portugal are across the ocean, and somehow I think the setting sun, or the sun reflecting off the red tile roofs or the coloured buildings. I don't know what it is, but the colour here at different times of the day is just magical. So I never take that for granted. I mean, it's just glorious. So I think those are my happy moments, when I really appreciate that I'm by the water again, the view, and the sort of the colours, the changing colours of the day. What was the second part of your question?
Yeah, what possibilities are you looking forward to enjoying in the future?
Right. Well, I think I've alluded to that, and that is that I think I'm going to start splitting my time between here, and I've identified Edinburgh as the place that I want to.
So you're ready for another potential move then, or a shift?
Well, it's the splitting. You know, I really I'm grateful for the opportunity to have residency in Europe.
Yeah. And
to have excellent healthcare here, and to have a life here. And yet I want to explore something else.
Yeah.
And for some reason I'm pulled to Edinburgh. I think I do like small size cities. So I'm pulled there because I think there's a lot of culture. It's a small sized city. Again, I don't drive, so I can easily get about. There's a lot of things on offer for me there. And I'm sure I can speak to this with you because I know this is important to you. There's a very big esoteric community in Edinburgh. And
I have a lot of customers actually from Scotland.
Yeah, I bet.
Around that area.
Yeah. And my spiritual life is very important to me, and I feel a pull to go there to imbibe in that environment and that community to feed the spiritual side of my life.
Wow, excellent. That sounds amazing. Wowzers. This has been really nice to get to know a little bit more about you. I've just got one final question, if I may.
Okay.
Seeing as you're still kind of in the process of moving, it sounds like it's something that like you never stop moving necessarily, do you?
Mm-hmm.
I love your stretch into Edinburgh. I think that sounds great. But I think what I'd really like to know is, how have you changed, or what have you learned about yourself from all the moves? Because you were talking about growth, personal growth, and nourishing yourself. How have you grown? Like, what have you learned about yourself in this process?
Well, a lot, of course, but now I'm much older, so hopefully I've learned.
That does happen.
Hopefully I've learned the getting of wisdom. Yeah, you do get it when you're in your 60s. One of the most obvious to me when I moved here is that coming out of the culture of the US, which is a workaholic culture, and it's so driven, everything has to happen yesterday, and it's very demanding in that regard. One of the reasons I had my first accident here was that I was so panicked about being late for an appointment, which of course,
that doesn't matter so much here, does it?
I'm going to get the giggles.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why on earth did I care? Well, I didn't know then. It just didn't matter that you're late, half an hour late's even fine here. I've learned to slow down. I'm not impatient like I was. I'm not as demanding as I was. And, even though I'm Australian and I very much identify with Australia, I suppose I had my formative young adult years in the US. And I very much acculturated to that culture, which, as I say, is very driven. It's very workaholic and very demanding. So I brought that with me here. Big mistake. I mean, for any of your American listeners, you absolutely cannot come here and find any joy if you bring that with you. It does not operate here the way it does in the US. It just does not. You have to be prepared to suspend all of those learned needs, desires, behaviours and expectations in order to embrace the very different life or way of doing things here, very different culture, which is that things happen very slowly and in a very relaxed manner. And of course, we all know about the bureaucracy too. It's very slow. And I'm just used to that. Now I get the giggles like, Portugal, it'll happen at some point, but it is not happening today.
Yes, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we went to our local government offices to just try and arrange something very, very simple. 7 or 8 times. It was quite funny. I mean, we even recognised that there were 2 French-speaking women. I'm quite fluent in French, and our Portuguese wasn't up to it. And they would come. They would speak to us really, really like old friends because we had seen them so many times. But I mean, the other thing I've noticed is if you put pressure on them, they're really not interested. They don't respond very well to pressure. Like in the UK, and I'm not sure what it's like in the US, but if anyone put pressure on me, I would most likely cave and work that bit harder. But it just doesn't work here. And I love the Portuguese for that, actually.
I do too. One of the things that has brought me joy as a result of teaching me how to slow down is grocery shopping, perhaps in a small store, even in the bigger stores, where the person who is checking out has the attention of the checkout person completely. No one else in the line matters except this one person who is checking out. Yes. And particularly for the elders. And I had my grandmother till she was in her 90s, and she still liked to do her own grocery shopping and so on. And of course, she was very slow. So to see that the slowness of the elders is respected here, such that they're given all the time they need to check out. Doesn't matter that we all have to wait behind, even if, they're conversing about her grandchildren or the weather or whatever it is, we all stand there and we wait.
Yeah.
I mean, what a lesson in, I think, patience and respect and humanity. I mean, the Portuguese really do have something to teach us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have you got a moment just to tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing right now? Because it'd be good to plug your work as well.
Thank you. Well, I think the reason I'm at ease doing this is because I have a podcast, and it started during the pandemic. So I think I've been going maybe 18 months now, and I'm just about to drop my 35th episode. Wow. So it's Women Who Walk. Mm-hmm. And it's a spin-off of one of the books that I wrote about that's about women who've moved countries. The book particularly is about women who've moved countries en route to a life in Portugal. The podcast, though, because I, like everyone, was sort of stuck at home, I wanted to reach beyond women in Portugal. I wanted to go further afield because we couldn't travel. So I interview women not just in Portugal, but around the world. And it's the same theme. It's women who've moved countries. And basically, we're sort of talking about their journey. I think what's my tagline? It's unpacking the journeys of intrepid women who've moved country to country for work, for love, for freedom, for adventure, something like that. So I just try and cover all bases. But in fact, I ask a lot of similar questions to the ones that you've asked me in order to kind of give a foundation of where they're from, what was it that propelled them to move from their country of origin, the countries that they've been to, a little story around those experiences, and then where are they now and what are they doing? And so it nourishes me.
Yeah. There's your growth. You're doing what you need.
Exactly. And hopefully people who listen are inspired. I'm hoping that women who listen are inspired to believe that they can do what their heart desires as well.
And where can they find that podcast, Louise?
Well, they can find it on my website, louiseross.com. And of course, it's available on all major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon Music, and so on. But they can find links to that on my website under podcast. On the masthead, it says podcast, and then you click on that. And each woman has her own page with a transcript and pictures, transcript from the episode and pictures that go along with the transcript.
Wow, nicely done. You really are taking people on the journey. I love it. So thank you very much for sharing parts of your journey today and your
Thank you, Louisa.
I really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking again at some point in the near future. I'll be surprised if we don't.
All right.
Absolutely.
I'm happy to chat further.
Yeah, me too.
Happy to help with this new project that you and Carl are working on. And I think you're both wonderful interviewees, and you both bring such warmth and love to what you do. So it's a joy to listen and watch you both.
Thank you very much. For us, it's all about feeling at home wherever we are.
Yeah.
So we'll do whatever we can to help people feel at home.
Wonderful.
Thank you
that's
so much.
Very worthy. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Lots of love then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so that's the end of the interview with Louise Ross. Isn't she amazing? And obviously, if you want to check out her work, then just go to www.louiseross.com and you can find her podcast all over the place. All the big names that you'd expect, you can find it there. So what I really got from that is just how being in a new place can almost spur you on a new journey. You know, it can inspire you to do something really quite wonderful. And I love how Louise has integrated herself, using in particular her love of supporting women and being connected with women. It's helped start a whole new life for her. So that was amazing. And I'm hoping that we'll have Louise on another time. Anyway, if this is the first time you've joined us and you've enjoyed this, then please do subscribe if you haven't already. You can also click the notification bell, and that way you'll know when the next show is due. Obviously, I will give you a little warning. Carl is putting stuff on there all the time. So if you don't want lots of things in your inbox, watch out for that. But please do subscribe. And obviously, if you've enjoyed this, then please do smash that like button, or maybe just click it. And also feel free to share. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us here today and being part of the Good Morning Portugal community. I hope that we can connect again real soon. Lots of love. Bye for now.